Okay, so we will be presenting the Neuropsychology of Decision Making as our presentation today. It's by me, Deoshree, and Shubhika along with me, who will be going through this concept a little bit. So we have to understand that have we ever wondered why sometimes we make snap decisions that seem irrational later, or why we might be stubbornly sticking to our first impressions even when faced with new information. While we've dealt with all these puzzles through social psychology, we need to understand what neural mechanisms go on in that process. In these puzzling behaviors, what can be better understood through the fascinating field of neuropsychology, and what if we peek inside of the brain of ours to see what exact mechanisms drive our decision. So let's dive in. The role of neuropsychology in decision making is offered profound insight in intricate world of our decision making by unraveling the cognitive and neural mechanisms that guide our choices. Right. So by exploring the brain's inner working, neuropsychological research elucidates how we make advantageous decisions, shedding light on neural circuits and cognitive processes involved. So understanding neuropsychology can help understand the cognitive mechanisms that are behind this process, the impact on behavior, and the complexity of the multifaceted way we process decision making. It's a blend of all the factors which are involved, whether it be cognitive, emotional, or social factors. So, to dive in Brain's decision making playbook, where neuropsychology unveils the cognitive gears and neural sparks behind our choices, from decoding why we opt for pizza over salad and understanding high stake gambles that we take in risk making decisions, this field illuminates the science of our everyday extraordinary decisions. Join us in exploring the fascinating blend of this mind, emotional, and social cues that shape our actions. Okay. So it's absolute paramount the role of prefrontal cortex that plays when we are orchestrating complex decision making processes, and involvement is key to understand this whole process. As we all understand that prefrontal cortex is very important in our executive functioning, one of them being decision making itself. So integration of information, the PFC or prefrontal cortex acts like a conductor. It harmonizes all the inputs, sensory, emotional, memory, into a cohesive symphony of understanding. Just as a conductor blends diverse instruments in a unified piece, the PFC integrates these informations to form comprehensive assessments of situations. Okay, then we evaluate options. Think of it as a financial advisor weighing in risk and rewards. Just like that, PFC also conducts a meticulous cost benefit analysis, considering immediate gains versus long term gains, and which is the one that you're looking for in the current beneficial decision making process that you want to evaluate, right? Optimizing what you get out of it. Then regulation of impulses is absolutely important. It's like a wise parent also guiding the child through a toy store. So it helps you suppress the impulsive desires like grabbing a toy every time you see it. Rather than doing that, it encourages thoughtful choices that align with your values more. So ensures decisions guided by rationality rather than fleeting impulses or emotions. Directed behavior, it sees everything like a project manager, constructs in a way where goals are clear, divisive, and detailed, monitored through progress, and manages the functions that contribute to long term achievements. Lastly, does a conflict resolution or cognitive flexibility analysis. So it's like a skilled negotiator resolves the conflicts in a diplomatic summit, adeptly navigates disagreements that might be coming through different signals in your brain, and then flexibly allows the decision that one you're looking for and tenses all your attention towards that, ensuring relevance and effectiveness. So once we cover this major important cortex here, we need to understand that limbic system are also an important part here, as they are the emotional center of our decision making. These neural hub lies the emotional sector or the limbic system, which is like a lively neighborhood of the brain structures that just doesn't handle the emotions, but also plays a crucial role in decision making. It's like, in the back pushing all the decisions that you're making. So at the heart of this system is amygdala, the emotional center of the brain. I'm sure this is a term that we all are very aware or maybe somewhere have heard. If we're dealing in neuropsychology, it's like a tiny sentinel that scans information for potential threats or rewards. So it's looking for fears. And when you encounter a decision point, amygdala swiftly evaluates situations, signaling whether to feel fear, pleasure, or something in between, which eventually, enters the prefrontal cortex also, influencing the decision making that you're taking. So this emotional input isn't just background noise, it's kind of actively doing the task or the job. But wait, there's more. Enter the hippocampus, the memory whiz of your limbic system. It's like brain's librarian if you're forgetting. It is meticulously cataloging past experiences. And when you're faced with a new choice, hippocampus flips through the pages of your mental roadblocks and retrieves memories of similar situations that might have happened before with you. This helps you to learn from the past decision and avoid repeating mistakes. Think of it as like your brain's own lesson learned folder, right? So that way you are always aware the next time you're making a decision, but it can also sometimes hamper situations. You must we must see this in future slides when I talk about heuristics. Also, hypothalamus is a big ultimate multitasker. As we understand, it kind of manages all the basic needs of our body, whether it be hunger, thirst, or even an urge to cuddle a cute puppy. So these primal drives that can hijack your decision making process remind you sometimes that, when you have a growling stomach or a parched throat and you are in a very intense decision making process, even, in a very rational argument, a funny frown on another person's face can distract your mind and influence what decision you take. You might smile in between. So together, these limbic system superstars create a dynamic uh, duo of emotions, memories, and primal urges that eventually influence how you see situations and make decision next time. So remember, these are the VIPs that are pulling strings at the back of your head. So especially if you're going down the research spectrum, you'll see in the major depressive disorder, it is often associated with hyperactivity in amygdala. So, processing of emotions like fear is what's happening there, and decreased activity in prefrontal cortex. So, reasonable planning and impulse control is decreased, which eventually leads to decision making deficits. Study have shown that individuals with MDD exhibit increased bias towards negative information that we also see in our clinical practice, but also during decision making tasks, this increased bias towards negative information can make them have the tendency to take less riskier choices, to have more passive way of decision making compared to healthy controls. And also studies in uh, decision making related to schizophrenia and bipolar disorder can help you identify specific cognitive processes that increase the risk of in case of self-harm or relapse. So once when we're going through developing preventive measures, clinicians can often use this information to develop their intervention, target these specific cognitive and neural mechanisms along with their intervention as they go on. Okay, so moving on. What are the major neurotransmitters involved? When we're talking about neuropsychology, we cannot miss the neurotransmitters or the chemical messengers which are zipping through the neural pathways to ensure your decisions are on point, like a team, like playing specific roles along the way, right? So when you were always talking about neurotransmitters, somehow with neuropsychology, dopamine comes to be some neurotransmitters which is always talked about, especially in case of whether it be reward motivation and of course decision making. In this process, it's a high fiber of of neurotransmitters rewarding your brain with surge of pleasure whenever you make the right, quote unquote, right decision. Think of it as your brain's way of saying nice job, keep it up, right? So it's kind of modulating that its role is influencing how you take decisions, which the one that will feel pleasurable is the one you'll move towards quickly and fast, rather than the one that's either probably slowly gratified or not giving you the right dose of dopamine. Then there is serotonin, the mood stabilizer. So it's like a Zen master of neurotransmitters, keeping your emotions balanced and your decisions steady. When serotonin's level are just right, you're more likely to make thoughtful, rational decisions instead of letting your emotions or impulses run wild. So next in line we have norepinephrine, the alertness amplifier. This neurotransmitter is like a shot of espresso to your brain, sharpening your focus and enhancing your decision making speed. Very important when we are in a riskier situation, when we're trying to make a fast decision, especially and in stages of alertness or stress. So it's especially handy when you need to make high pressure situations. Another one that's not really mentioned here, but it's forgotten often, is oxytocin, the trusty bonding buddy, known as the love hormone as well. It strengthens the social connection and influences decision related to trust and empathy. It's like a warm hug from your brain, encouraging you to make decisions that foster cooperation and connection with others. Okay, so moving forward, we have to understand that heuristics definitely play a role. Now, we've always heard of heuristics, at least when we are in psychological studies, in form of sociological, social psychological aspect. But in neuropsychology, they are also viewed as an essential tool which brain uses to navigate complex processes. These mental shortcuts or rule of thumbs allow individual to make quick and efficient decisions without need for exhaustive analysis. You'll not go in an algorithmic analysis every decision you get, right? So there are fast, quick mechanisms in the background. For example, the availability heuristic is how we name it in psychology, illustrates how individuals tend to assess probability of events based on how easily example comes to their mind. So it can be a recency bias. It could be something that has happened specifically with you often, but not a reality outside, and that can affect your way of taking decision. Also, in emotionally charged events, such as, let's say you see a news today on the news channel about an airplane crash or a train crash, so the person might overestimate the risk of air travel or train travels despite the statistical evidence showing its safety, right? So what we see on news is usually one time occurrence out of especially when you're seeing it once in a while, and it's taking a big ecological system in account, whether you're sitting here today in Delhi and you're seeing something happening in another part of the country, you might overestimate these evidences despite the lack of what might be happening in your state. Okay, so biases in neural mechanisms, we understand that our brain and our whole mechanism is not as straightforward. So these decision making processes are specifically linked with neural mechanisms which cause us to take specific decisions that bend towards us. So for instance, confirmation bias, it's something that involves favoring information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, right? So research by Kadosh and colleagues in 2017 used fMRI to show increased activity in dorsal prefrontal cortex during confirmation bias tasks, indicating its role in processing biased information in brain, neurologically speaking, and how those parts of prefrontal cortex got alight when they were doing the research. Similarly, an impact on behavior and functioning, decision-making biases can significantly affect behavior and cognitive functioning in the frontal lobe, affecting cognitive control and particular susceptibility. So a study by Damasio in 2005 demonstrated that patients with damage to ventromedial prefrontal cortex exhibited impaired decision making due to compromised emotional regulation, especially highlighted in impact of neural damage on biased decision making in that process. So here we also have some studies in specific brain damages and lesions that might be happening in ventromedial frontal cortex to understand what kind of decision making people take in those processes. And of course it's biased, it's compromised, it's not up to the mark, is what they found in this study. Okay, so as we move forward, I'll just hand it over to Shubhika to help us understand the other processes that might be involved.
Okay. Now we'll move forward with basal ganglia and habitual decision makings. How does it help in our habitual decision making? Now, what does it mean? So it works in three parts. First, which is habit formation. The basal ganglia basically works in habitual decision making as they support the formation and execution of learned behavior, providing insights into neural mechanisms underlining automatic and repetitive choices. For instance, brushing your teeth or driving on a familiar route, you do not have to think so much. These decisions are made in your mind that needs to happen in a certain way. Next is dopaminergic pathway. This is somewhat already been explained by Deoshree when we did discuss about how dopamine affects our decision making. So same comes here that automatic studies says that the involvement of this pathway in basal ganglia in reward-based learning and specifically in reinforcement of decision-making strategies highlight the role of neurotransmitter dopamine. So, for instance, they help us to seek out activities that give us more pleasure. For example, eating your favorite food by releasing dopamine. Next, decision making deficits. Dysfunctions in basal ganglia is associated with decision making deficit, offering valuable insight into neural basis of decision impairments and the impact of basal ganglia related condition on the choice behavior. Problems in basal ganglia can lead to decision making difficulties, such as those seen in Parkinson's disease, where individuals may struggle with simple choices. Moving forward to neuroplasticity and decision making. So, learning and adaptation. Neuroplasticity underpins learning and adaptation in decision making as the brain undergoes structure and functional changes in response to decision outcomes, shaping our future choices and decision strategies as well. Why it is important? Because it works as rehabilitative interventions. Understanding neuroplasticity. Deoshree, the screen is not getting presented. Could you please look it into it? Yeah. So, as we were discussing about rehabilitative interventions, understanding neuroplasticity in decision making has implications for rehabilitative interventions as it informs strategies aimed at enhancing decision making and promoting adaptive neuroplastic change in individuals with decision impairments. Next is cognitive training. Neuroplasticity research underscores the potential of cognitive training to modulate decision making processes, offering venue for interventions that harness brain's activity, adaptivity to improve the choice behavior. Moving on to emotional influences on decision making. So, the research says that our emotion do influence the way we make decision. So there is an emotional bias. Emotion exerts a significant influence on decision making, as emotional state can bias choices and alter risk preferences, highlighting the impact of adaptive response on decision making process. Neural correlates of emotion. Neuroimaging studies reveal the neural correlates of emotional influence on decision making, showing the brain region involved in the process of emotional signals and integrates them into choices. Next, emotional regulation strategies. Understanding the impact of emotions on decision making informs the development of emotion regulation studies aimed at mitigating the influence of emotional bias on choice and promoting rational processes. For instances, if you are angry, you want to take an irrational decision. But if you take a step back and just take a long, deep breath where you are managing your emotions, you tend not to go that irrational route. That's a basic example of how our emotions create a bias. Moving forward, so we are towards the end of our presentation. Here is a simple quiz. So the first question is, which of the following neurotransmitter play a significant role in influencing our choice? A. Dopamine. B. GABA. 3. Glutamate. And fourth, histamine. Please use the chat box or unmute yourself. Yes, A is the right answer, dopamine, which has been well explained by Deoshree. The next question, which brain region is involved in executive decision making? A. Prefrontal cortex. B. Cortex. C. Temporal cortex. D. Occipital cortex. Absolutely right. The answer is A. Thank you so much, everyone, for being participative and attentive throughout the presentation.